Coming up, on this week's IndigiPolitics, we delve into the Indian Citizenship Act of 1924 and talk equitable voting rights. Plus, filmmaker Rebekka Schlichting tackles food sovereignty and seed warriors. Join us for those interviews, plus headlines on the ICT Newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
Support for the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez comes from the Arizona PBS studios in Phoenix at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communications at Arizona State University.
Amidawa Hopa. Thank you for joining us. I'm Aaliyah Chavez. Funeral services are underway in Wisconsin for a prominent Native American rights leader. The family of Ernie Stevens Sr. shared the 92-year-old Oneida Nation of Wisconsin citizen died over the weekend. Stevens had a very long and storied career, working to push self-determination after graduating with a degree from MIT. He held many titles over the years, most notably as the executive director of the Los Angeles Indian Center and as the first vice president of the National Congress of American Indians. ICT's Mark Trahant has covered Stevens' career and weighed in.
I think we're just at the point where we're losing this whole generation of folks in the 1970s who really led tribal governments and tribal people through a really huge transition. It was the beginning of self-determination when tribes, not the federal government, were deciding things, and it was really important, and these were the folks doing it.
Moving internationally, an indigenous community in Panama has been forced to relocate after climate change threatened its coastal town. The indigenous Gunas from the city of Gardi Sugdub had been preparing to move from their small island off the coast of Panama as their population grew, but hotter summers and fiercer storms quickened the evacuation. Due to rising sea levels, the country's government built housing on the mainland and is in the process of relocating 300 indigenous families to new homes. The Gunas are the first of 63 communities along Panama's Caribbean and Pacific coasts that government officials and scientists expect to be forced to relocate in the coming decades. Alaska Native art is being featured on a global scale within the seafood industry. Tlingit and Athabascan artist Rico Whirl collaborated with the Alaska Seafood Marketing Institute to create form-line designs that honored the Alaska Native connection to seafood species. Formline is a distinctive artistic style used in Southeast Alaska that has been carried on for hundreds of generations. With seafood serving as a cornerstone of sustenance for Alaska Native communities, the Institute wanted to create a platform and artist connection that honors the state's heritage. Well, you are seeing overflight video showing a new eruption of the Hawaiian volcano Kilauea. The activity started earlier this week on the Big Island in an area that last erupted in 1974. While the eruption is currently paused, about half a mile of fissures opened up in a remote location inside Volcanoes National Park. Scientists said many flocked to try to get a glimpse of the action, and they've kindly urged folks to be respectful of the sacred landscape.
Equitable voting rights for Indigenous communities continues to be a struggle. This is being highlighted by the centennial of the Indian Citizenship Act of 1924. Post-1971 miners are not covered under the Radiation Exposure and Compensation Act, affecting many Native American uranium miners. We get the latest update on a push to expand this act. And former President Donald Trump has been convicted of 34 felony counts. Here to talk more about how this could impact this year's election is regular contributor Holly Cook-Macaro. She is a principal at The Angle for this week's IndigiPolitics. Welcome to the newscast, Holly.
Hi, Polly. Thank you for having me.
So first, what does former President Donald Trump's conviction mean for this year's election?
Well, the former President Trump's conviction is going to mean that this topic is going to remain at the forefront, and even more so with his conviction, right? And things that would have derailed a presidency before. Think of Whitewater 25 years ago for the Clintons, right? That investigation. I think most people don't recall the substance, but the bar for what will derail a presidential campaign has certainly been lowered in the last decade. And the conviction of a former president and current presidential candidate of 34 felonies, it's been a very interesting week to see how that is being spun. And I think there are some efforts to build affinity with other felons, which there are a lot of humorous directions we can go here, but we're not going to. And I did find that one a bit comical. For Indian country, I think that Trump's conviction is going to make the fight for moderates and for in these there's just a few battleground states, right? Wyoming's red, California's blue. You take all those states, you're really drilling down to Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Minnesota, which is still kind of purple, but in those, Nevada, but in those states that I just named, those hot battleground states, 4 of them have significant Native American populations. Now, it really does seem, given by the fundraising numbers that came through, I think he announced $53 million the day after his conviction, which was the largest chunk of money that has been brought in. And that race has really been being won by President Biden. The amount of money that Biden has been able to raise in up against what President Trump has been able to raise, his conviction actually is Trump's conviction is making those numbers become a little bit more even. So I think those who are remain dug in on either side. It's going to be that middle ground. And oftentimes Indian country, we always say our issues are bipartisan or nonpartisan. And so Indian country, looking at the issues and looking at the candidates and who is going to align with their beliefs the most. I don't think any candidate is ever, perfect and aligns perfectly with folks' priorities. But that, I think, is where we are going to see some impacts in Indian country of Trump's conviction. That fight for the moderate voter, the middle of the road, and that is oftentimes where Indian country is falling. I really see that more and more. Over the years, there's been a historical alignment of Indian country with Democrats. I do see that there's a really kind of, looking at the candidates, looking at the issues, much of this driven by a very loud and great youth voice about, what are the issues? Where do we stand? What should we be demanding of our candidates? And there's just such a whole conversation we can have about how these candidates can win the Native vote. But that fight for the moderates, I think is really where this conviction is going to point.
And this isn't the only case that Trump is involved in. So what are some of the other legal battles that Donald Trump is currently facing?
Well, I don't want to give a rundown of all of those. I think the fact that we have a president who is involved in several legal cases, again, just illustrates, I think, to America that the bar for what is okay and what doesn't derail a presidency. I've always said that we hold our elected officials to a higher standard, and rightfully so, because they represent and make decisions on behalf of the American people. And for us in Indian country, those decisions affect us immediately. So I think that when the bar is lowered as to the standard we hold our presidential candidates, those impacts are going to be felt in Indian country. I hope that those considerations are considered deeply.
It's been 100 years since the passage of the Indian Citizenship Act. What does this anniversary mean?
in all of this context, right? And part of what I was just saying is that Indian country really starting to look more at the issues. Though the 100th anniversary of the Citizenship Act, I think we're all celebrating it as a bit of, this is our 100th anniversary of our right to vote, which is a bit misleading because it didn't confer our right to vote. It took several more decades before all 50 states actually had conferred the right to vote on Native Americans. And as our friends at the Native American Rights Fund, who do such a great job in defending our access to the ballot, will tell you, it has forced new levels of creativity in keeping Native Americans from that unfettered access to the ballot, whether it be residency requirements, whether it be tribal IDs. There's always been something new. I admire NARF's 100% win track record in defending our access to the ballot, and that I think is really something that should be celebrated. I think as we move forward into this cycle with that narrative behind us, right? When we think about our ancestors who didn't have the right to vote and who fought for it, and who either fought in the military and came home and then gained that right to vote, but everything that it brings along with it, I think it makes it a more compelling argument than ever in an election where I'm hearing a little bit of, should I sit this one out? We should never sit these out. If knowing what our ancestors went through to have this access to the ballot, and the fight that continues today to ensure that we have equal access to the ballot, means that we should all be taking advantage of that right.
And what are some of the contemporary issues that, again, you named a few earlier in your answer, that continue to impact Indigenous voters' access to the ballot?
Well, we've seen in North Dakota, where knowing that most reservations don't have street addresses, I feel like since that case, there's been this more concerted effort nationwide. Back home in Red Lake, all of a sudden we have street addresses, although we weren't a target of that lawsuit. But it required IDs that didn't have just PO boxes. It required street addresses. And so those things take time and money and infrastructure investments that Indian country really had to scramble to accomplish in that election. I think, was that 2018, 2014, 2018. And so we continue to see the access to the ballot denied, in that we don't have polling places on reservations. It's whether we can count our own ballots on the reservation. All of those issues are really, I think, systemic pieces that are built in and are remnants of racism back in the 50s, over the decades, as we've waged this fight for access to the ballot. We can count our own ballots, and we can have access, we can have ballot places, and we should on the reservation. So all of those fights continue today.
And the Radiation Exposure and Compensation Act will end June 10th if Congress doesn't act. Why is this program important to Indigenous communities? Well, they call it the RECA, which is the, everything has a acronym in Washington, D.C. And it is important to Indian country, and particularly to the Navajo Nation, given the uranium mining and radiation exposure that was really, the heart of that in Indian country. And so the Navajo Nation has passed a resolution in support of Senator Hawley's bill that has passed the Senate, would reauthorize the bill, and it would expand it, eligibility, and also extend it to 2030. That bill has broad support in both chambers. Speaker Johnson, though, had intended to move a bill introduced by several members of the Utah delegation that would reauthorize it for 2 years. And it was much more limited. It didn't expand it. It was what they're calling a cleaner bill. And Speaker Johnson ran into a wall of opposition to moving that bill over the other. And so he was forced to pull that bill this week. And now the clock is ticking. Today is June 5th. We've got 5 days before that. When we say it expires, the authorization for the bill expires, and the opportunity to apply for the benefits if you were a victim of the radiation exposure, it expires on June 10th. So what I expect will happen is we see that Senate bill go to the floor of the House. Well, Holly, that's all the time that we have. Thank you for joining the newscast.
Yes, thank you, Polly. It's good to see you.
While food sovereignty is a goal of many tribes across Turtle Island, what happens when the tribe is removed from its traditional homelands? Filmmaker Rebekka Schlichting explores Pawnee corn and its return to Nebraska in Seed Warriors. Take a look.
My mom said there wasn't a straight spoon in the house when I was a little girl, that I'd be outside digging all the time. I've been growing plants, it seems like all my life. The flowers that I use, they're still the same flowers that I was growing when I was a teenager. Everywhere I moved, I kept the seeds and kept growing them and kept collecting them. My people, the Akitaru, the Pawnee, didn't always live in Oklahoma. Our homeland was in the land that later became Nebraska. My great-great-grandparents couldn't take much, but they took their sacred corn.
We held on to that corn from that walk all the way from Nebraska down to Oklahoma, a really difficult, challenging time where many of our people were lost. But some of us still held those seeds. Then it's just a really beautiful thing to me that decades later, we found a way for those seeds to still germinate, even if they were down to like a handful of seeds.
I like this one. We called it the Knife Chief corn because we thought Dennis Knife Chief had cross-pollinated corn or something, but he came up with this striped corn, this red and white striped. And about 6 feet down, they found the buffalo skull. Well, the buffalo hadn't been there since 1863, and inside the buffalo skull was that seed. The corn didn't reach its full potential in Oklahoma. The Oklahoma soil weakened the seed. So our Pawnee put the seeds away. One of the first questions I asked is, hey, where's our corn? I mean, that's what we're known for. It took a long while to answer that question. Our culture committee, our chiefs, asked families, and they would produce what they had, and some of it we couldn't get to grow because it was stored so poorly. But some were kept in bundles, and there'd only be 20 seeds in there. One day, I got an unexpected call from Nebraska. That gave me hope that we could grow our corn again in our homelands.
I worked at the Archway in Kearney over I-80 that teaches a lot of history about the trails and transportation. And I had natives telling me, you really need to teach more about the 1,000 years before that. So that's how I met Deb Eckelhawk. I wanted to start a program about the Pawnee because we're in the homeland here in central Nebraska. So wanted to have gardening as part of that because I grew up on a corn farm and I've always gardened. She sent me just 25 seeds in 2004, the first year, and I planted them like we do. We plant corn in late April here in Nebraska, so I went out and did that, and I was all excited, and it all rotted in the ground. It was too early and too cold. So the next year, she sent 25 kernels. She said, I have 25 left. This is it. I can't part with the last 25. We have to be able to show our children what it looked like once.
Ronnie O'Brien, she's my little corn sister. In fact, we gave her name in Pawnee. Yeah, I think she cried for days when that happened. We talk almost daily and sometimes several times a day. Other Nebraska farmers wanted to plant Pawnee corn too. One was Dale Fike, a man that I would later call friend.
We wouldn't be here if it wouldn't have been for the Pawnee helping my family. When they homesteaded just a mile south of here in 1869, there was a Pawnee encampment another mile south of them. It was the Pawnee, and they ended up, trading food and things with them, and it's evolved into a love affair, and like I say, in a very spiritual way. It's become, the connection with the Pawnee people. They are truly family. This is a manicuring of a precious resource from a historical and spiritual base that is teaching us how we need to be in the future. It is teaching the next generations.
To see and to hear Dale, when his great-grandparents, homesteaded this place, and how the Pawnees helped them through that winter. They felt they owed something to them Pawnees. It's pretty awesome that he still feels that way. I mean, that was a long, long time ago, and things die off, but that's still in his heart, in his family's heart, to recognize that. That really tells me a lot about him and his family, that they're really good people.
Yeah, so it really makes a nice drink, and you don't have to heat it, just infuse it.
Each fall we travel to Nebraska to pick and prepare corn for our ceremonies and to restore our traditional diet.
There's always a feeling for me when I am here with this land of being home, which in a sense, maybe I feel a little bit silly to say because I've never lived here, but it's true.
I love to remind Nebraskans that we were the first corn huskers.
We're smiling more than we have in a long time. There's a little bit of teaching that goes into almost everything that we're doing. Yeah, it's been beautiful to see it all play out into a camp setting. So this year we're processing eagle corn. We've been working towards this moment for a long time to be able to serve eagle corn to the people at our dances, at our spring ceremonies, where everybody could try it, everybody could know what it tastes like.
I like the eagle corn to taste, because when we shell it, we get the whole thing. We're careful about how we take the kernels off the cob. But when you cook it, we'll blanch, roast it, and then take it off the cob. But then when you cook it, it turns like super round, and it just kind of pops in your mouth. And to me, it's got this really incredible nut-like taste. That's definitely my favorite. And we like it when it looks like an eagle with its wings spread out. It's fun to find that design in there and a lot of other designs. It's just like an art show every day, looking at all the different varieties. Lots of prayers have gone into this corn in all phases of production, and anytime you pray brings out the healing properties of plants. We've been putting wrong foods in our bodies, so if we get back to a food that our DNA, our bodies recognize, then, hey, we're gonna have healthier people. We use corn, as most tribes do, in every celebration there is, powwows, ceremonies, and there's just so much reverence to it. When we were on the verge of extinction, it was just a miracle that we found some of our corn. I mean, what an adventure it has been.
Mother corn is very, very, very sacred. To have something that was passed down generation to generation to generation, and we're still able to consume it, to taste it. It touches the soul. To realize, our grandmas, great-grandmas took care of this enough to supply us.
That is a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.